Welcome back to the Other Side Lifestyle Podcast with Jim and Aram. Today we have a doctor, so he like thinks he's smart or something like that. He like speaks all well and stuff, like bro. Uh, from the mainland to Hawaii, we have Dr. Allan Bacon. Allan, how do you feel about Joe Biden?
I absolutely support any president of the United States
I
at all
love
times.
Fantastic. I love it.
You're such a diplomat. He's a
He's
diplomatic guy, folks.
I
Allan
should run for
Bacon.
office.
Yeah, 2028. Allan Bacon,
Yeah.
2028. I
Well, he's
like it.
already. I mean, he's going to be campaigning at the Real Coaches Summit. That's where he's going to start his
That's
campaign.
where it begins.
I like
This
it.
is where the movement begins.
March of 24 is where you can start to see where his political rhetoric stands, and that's where you're going to finally be in full support of this genius that we have in front of us, who started out as a dentist.
Yeah.
So let's hear that story a little bit, because just because you have a doctor in front of your name doesn't mean you actually heal anybody.
Doesn't mean you're a doctor.
How many people just quote The Hangover to you and say, "You're not a doctor, you're a dentist"?
So I get a couple things. I either get that one or physicians are just failed dentists from other people. So I get a little bit of both.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah. So the dental to fitness shift was kind of an interesting thing. I mean, I had been attached to fitness for quite a while. I mean, I was professionally formulating supplements for quite a while, even when I was going through medical schooling.
Yeah.
And so I kind of had my foot in the door talking to people in the industry. I was always lifting, all that kind of stuff. My father ended up coming down with throat cancer. And, when he was going through all those struggles, one of the conversations that I had with him, and he was a dental surgeon, and one of the conversations that I had with him was, if you could do things over again, what would you do? And he made mention that he thought that spending some more time with family, because it's a very demanding job, and being able to do some of the things that he really loves, spending better quality time, was something that he wished he would have done. That same year, I was performing emergency surgery at 8:30 p.m. on December 24th. And so I was missing dinner with my in-laws and all that stuff. And I got back, finished that, came up with my wife, and I was like, I would love, she was in fitness too. And I was like, I would love to start a fitness coaching company and just see where that goes, do it on the side, keep practicing for now and see how things go. She was a good partner for that because she was a CrossFit Regionals qualifying athlete. She was an American record holding Olympic weightlifter. She competed at Worlds in 2019 and took silver in the Worlds. And so we were a good complement for coaching, because I'm kind of like an idiot jock meathead, bodybuilder, power lifter, that kind of thing. And she can work with the functional fitness athletes. And so it was nice to be able to cover a wide range of people. And, we started it, and it tended to do really well. And we moved out to Hawaii, and I was like, this is functioning really well on its own. How about I go all in on this and have some more quality time to myself, be able to control my schedule. And that kind of got the ball rolling. And Maui Athletics has been going for quite a number of years now. And I know that when people look at making these changes in their careers, it can be a really scary thing, but I think it can be an extremely rewarding thing. And, one of the big things that I talk to people about whenever we bring this up is, just because you have to work a couple jobs when you're chasing that one dream job doesn't mean that you failed. And in fact, for people going into fitness, I think it's almost necessary. Yeah. Because when you're coming up in fitness, you're not going to start out making six figures. I mean, that's just not the way that it is. And if you think that that's what it's going to be, then you're either an extremely attractive individual that can just make it on Instagram automatically, or you're in for a rough time.
Yeah.
And so I think that for the people that are thinking about doing this, who have those 9-to-5 jobs that aren't necessarily really happy, don't give it up. Stick with it. Use that as your parachute. If things don't work out, that's fine. But at least you don't have to live life as a what if. Set this up so you can do it on the side, and maybe it doesn't take off. Maybe you just have 5-10 clients or something like that, but you do that on the side, you get a little bit extra money, make yourself an LLC, get all those write-offs whenever you buy gym clothes, and, enjoy the benefits that way. But, hang on and say, okay, I've got a plan. I'm going to work the plan. I'm going to do it in not a stupid way, and we'll see where things go. And I think that that's the best way that people can move forward with this type of thing.
Absolutely. And it allows you to enjoy the coaching because you have that quote unquote, I hate the word safety net, because you have that full-time job and that income and all that, you don't feel the pressure of like, I got to pick one or the other. You quit, I'm going all in. And now you can't even enjoy it because there's so much pressure involved.
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with having that safety net. And I understand that, like, you completely get that, but that's what people look at this as. They're like, well, if I don't go all in from the beginning, well, maybe I'm failing, or maybe I'm not giving it, everything that I have. But the reality is you have a mortgage. You're going to have to pay for food. And, school loans don't forgive themselves unless you vote for Biden constantly. So
he's doing more. I heard another like 50 million or something like that.
Well, it's funny because it's the school loans get forgiven, but it gets pushed into the taxpayer. So somebody's paying for it. But in the short term,
the people who have degrees that got them jobs get to pay for the people with degrees that couldn't get jobs.
Right.
Could we have certification forgiveness programs?
Yeah. Business startup forgiveness programs. I mean, if you really want to spur economy, put money into business startups and
absolutely,
that's how you really get things going. More so than, your sociology degree from, a liberal arts college. And I'm saying this with no hate towards that, because I had originally a communications degree. So I know how some of these things go. But, whenever you have those types of things, where do you really want to put the money? Put it into a business. And when you're coming up as a coach, invest in that business. Keep that job on the side if you have to, and really put your extra added time into that and see where things go.
Yeah, invest in education. Do you know any educational events coming up in the
I heard
late
about
winter, early spring?
Heard about a good one in Vegas in March.
Really?
There's a couple brilliant people speaking there.
There's actually 4 doctors on that stage.
Nice.
4. Yeah, we got Dr. Allan Bacon, we got Dr. Susie Spurlock, we got Dr. Shante Cofield, and we got Dr. Alyssa Olenek.
There you go.
Oh,
you got the credential.
Dr. Sean Pastuch.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. Also, two doctors of physical therapy, 1 doctor of dentistry, right?
Dental surgery, yeah.
And then I think Shante was also a physical therapist. So Shante, Susie, and Pastuch are all DPTs.
There's going to be so many people asking for free consults.
Which from people
they should all have shirts that say no free consults when they go up to speak.
I'll make them shirts that say I'm not a doctor.
I'm gonna have a reader so I can swipe insurance cards.
Yeah. Do you have a message before we get into the topics and the things that we'll find out that we'll end up talking about, because we never have a plan? Do you have a message for the mainland people about, with you living in Maui, living in Hawaii? Do you have a message for the mainland people that might be against what they've heard in terms of traveling to visit you?
Now is a great time to visit Maui. We have many scenic beaches and very nice hotels open, and the local economy would thank you if you visited.
Yes, and he's not being sarcastic.
I'm not at all.
They're going through a hard time, and the news has made a lot of people afraid to go to Hawaii. It's a perfectly fine time. It's a small area that you're not going to be maybe visiting, but it's a huge island.
Well, you know what has been really nice about that whole situation is that the people on the mainland have really, this is going to sound terrible, opened their wallets up to us, but in a good way. We're extremely thankful because there's been so much donation to helping out the cause for the people that were displaced or lost their homes and everything like that. And I want people to know, because we've seen too many celebrities telling people to avoid coming out here. That's not really what we need. We've got a lot of local businesses that could really benefit from people coming out here. And if you're going to be considering giving money anyways, why not just come out here and spend that money and have a good time yourself? I mean, treat yourself when you're helping others.
I'm sold.
Absolutely.
I'm sold. Do you want to go in January?
The next conference?
Just Jimmy and I will come out in January as a couples retreat.
I've got a guest bedroom with a queen bed if you don't mind sharing.
Well, then we're not going to be
all we do. That's all we do.
But that's not stimulating the local economy, Alan.
You can go to the restaurants.
Every time they check in, we check into a hotel and they say, "Oh, did you want 1 king or 2 queens?" We're like, "1 king,
yeah.
1 king, please.
1 queen,
one twin."
It helps with the flow of the show when we really get to know each other.
Yes.
Also true.
Yes.
So, Alan, you're going to be discussing supplements, and we know that that's one of your bags. I don't want you to let all of the cat out of the bag today, but I do want to ask you one very important question about supplements, because we do have a lot of people that ask this all the time.
Sure.
Do you consider there to be supplements that are I don't want to say essential, but let's call them what they
staples,
are.
Staples that are good for everybody. Staples, kind of a
the
thing.
Ones that you
absolutely
should be taking.
Universal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that everybody, and this is something that I recommend to all my clients, unless there is something that would suggest to me not to recommend it to that person. For 99% of people, if you're otherwise healthy, I think that everybody should be taking, even people that don't work out, should likely be taking creatine, a properly dosed fish oil, and probably protein. I mean,
so go to properly dosed fish oil, because the school of thought on this ranges from fucking Poliquin 7 grams a day to the doctor who tells you that it's going to increase your cholesterol. So we have to find that spot.
Poliquin is absolutely batshit crazy. So we should ignore the stuff that came out from Poliquin.
So it's
if you look
8 grams per day.
So here, I mean, this is one of the things that I'm actually talking about. One of the nuances that I'm actually talking about at the conference, and there's enough nuance that I don't really mind giving this one away, because I think this can be really beneficial for people. But this, if you go to the conference, the Real Coaches Summit, you're going to find a lot of gems from my talk like this. The issue with fish oils is that the majority of both the public and researchers, whenever they look at fish oils, they'll say, okay, well, we want 3 grams of total omega-3 or whatever it is.
Okay.
The problem is total omega-3 doesn't really tell you anything, because that's not the active constituent that has been shown to be beneficial in fish oil. Yeah. Now, we constantly get this information. You need omega-3. So everybody thinks omega-3s are omega-3s. That doesn't tend to be the case. The active constituents in omega-3 are EPA and DHA. And then there are other rudimentary fats that are essentially, for all intents and purposes, filler. Mm. And so in 95%, I'm basing this on absolutely nothing other than anecdote. Fish oils on the market, 95%. They are not properly dosed. Yeah. And it's because they understand that the general public and even most coaches don't know the distinction here, the nuance here. And so they'll say, okay, well, you've got 2 grams of omega-3 here. And even if you look at the American Heart Association, their recommendation is 1 gram of omega-3 daily to help with heart health. But that doesn't tell you exactly what you're getting. So for purposes of both cardiovascular health as well as joint health, and some of the other potential benefits for fish oils, I recommend between 2 to 3 grams of EPA plus DHA daily. You want at least a 1-to-1 ratio of EPA to DHA or higher. Having more EPA is really beneficial. And it's funny too, because I'll have discussions with my physician friends and they'll say, oh, I saw a study and it showed that fish oils don't really benefit you. And I'll say, okay, show me the study. Let's take a look at this, because these are the studies that I look at day in and day out. And they'll say, like, look at the study right here. And they did 2 grams of omega-3, but they didn't control for EPA. They did control for DHA, or it was entirely DHA. When you take the studies that control for EPA and DHA and actually raise EPA more than anything else, that's where we start to see those benefits in the research of cardiovascular health, joint health, brain health, everything that we talk about with omega-3s. And so it's funny, because if you look for this information, you can certainly find studies that say fish oils don't do anything. You can find some that say that they do a ton. I mean, the Reduce It study was a very large study that was extremely well run, and they were giving very high amounts of EPA, and they found great benefits to cardiovascular health. And so when you control for things adequately, it appears that this is a very beneficial thing to take, not just for one thing, but for a large, host of benefits. Even in depressive disorders, it's been shown to be a very beneficial thing to take. And so when we start to know what we're actually looking for and then control for that in the products that we buy and what we take in, we may actually start to benefit instead of wasting our money on supplements. And so these are some of the little things that you can dial in on to make sure you're not wasting your money and actually get those benefits that you're shooting for. Now, having said all that, if you're eating 2 to 3 meals of fatty fish per week, you probably don't need to you probably don't need to supplement with fish oils because you're probably getting enough EPA and DHA from your food. But the reality is there's very few people that actually get fatty fish in that amount. I mean, most people don't enjoy eating fish, or fish can be expensive. It's difficult to prepare. So for most people, yeah, I would definitely have that down as one of those near necessary supplements if you're going to label some supplements as being necessary.
And then your weekly trip to sushi out with your wife is not enough.
That's not one weekly trip out is not enough. Yeah. That's a great addition.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily enough. Now, that day that you go and get it, just don't take your fish oil.
Yeah.
Well, are there
save some money?
Because it's such the supplement industry is crazy with quality control and
it's terrible
and all that. What are there? I know, and I hate when people ask like, what brand do you recommend, kind of a thing. But for us and for people listening, when it comes to the fish oil, are there any brands that you recommend? They can get on Amazon. There's actually this is a really good fish oil that's not $50, $60 a month. Or is that the kind of money that you might have to spend? What's that?
Nordic Naturals.
So this is again really nuanced in what you're looking for, because there's different kinds of fish oils. If I had to boil it down, I'll give two, and I'll give two because we can find something for your budget and what you're looking for. If you want the triglyceride form, which tends to have a little bit better absorption, it is the more natural form. Natural versus not probably doesn't make a massive difference, but if you're one of those natural people, this can help. Nordic Naturals, as you were recommending, the Ultimate Omega is a great choice. It's 4 pills per day, but you're not going to find anything for much less than that to get that EPA and DHA that we're looking for. And it tends to be very fairly priced.
Yeah.
For what it is. Yeah, and it's great.
$60 for 180 capsules.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, you're going to take 4 a day, store it in the freezer, take it with meals. That can help keep oxidation levels down and reduce fish burps and GI distress. If you want a little bit of a better price per serving, there's an ethyl ester version, which is slightly less absorbed than the triglyceride. But if you take the ethyl ester version with a fat containing meal, it counterbalances a lot of those absorption differences. And so you can spend about half the money or so, maybe 3/4 of the money, and get a good quality product. And I bring this up because I want people to have options and say, Nordic Naturals is a little bit on the pricey side. It's very reasonable, but it's pricier than some supplements that people want to buy. You can always go with something like Legion Triton. Yeah. They have a very good quality control system. And having said that, I am a sponsored athlete for Legion. So if you want to use the code DRBACON, you can for 20% off.
But
I want. Does Aram have it?
Aram, I think, only gives you 10% off. So use Bacon's code.
Use Bacon.
DR Bacon gives you 20% off. Now, having said all that, I did want to give the fact that Nordic Naturals is another good one. Controlled Labs has a good one. Oxy Mega.
Have you ever heard of the powdered morphogen ones?
I have not looked into those. I would be skeptical of a powdered form of EPA and DHA
it was getting pushed for a while. I know that a lot of people who worked with alongside morphogen were reaching out to me, and they're like, "This is a really great fish oil product." I read into it a little bit. I was in the same camp as you were. I'm like, it's hard to imagine a powdered version. It'd be like if I was taking powdered testosterone cypionate.
I would need to see research data suggesting what the bioavailability and uptake would be for that. Because my question for that would be, it could be EPA and DHA, but because it's in a different form, is this going to actually absorb?
Right.
Yeah. And there's a possibility it won't.
It came alongside, I believe it was that EPA, DHA, that I also had some nattokinase in it. So a little bit of a blood thinning effect there as well. So I think it was just a general cardiovascular supplement that they came up with. Mm-hmm. And I think their big shtick was that, well, since it's powdered, it doesn't need to be climate controlled, which means it doesn't go rancid, which means it can stay shelf stable for a long time.
Typically, there's a reason that now, not always, but there's typically a reason that the majority of the products don't go with these alternatives. And it's usually because there's an issue with it in some way. Since we're on this topic, every time this gets brought up, one of the things that people talk about is, oh, well, I take krill oil instead.
Or like cod liver.
Yeah, cod liver's fine. But I would really stay away from krill.
Interesting.
Okay. And again, this is something that I'll touch on at the conference, but this is a good point to show that, you know, we do have a lot of information that we can give you that can save you from making the wrong choices here. Krill is based off the recommendations for krill from the manufacturers are based off the fact that it uses something called a phospholipid bound form of omega-3s. And when they show you the research for it, they're 100% genuine in saying the phospholipid bound form is in the short term better absorbed than both triglyceride and the ethyl ester of the fish oils.
Okay.
What they don't mention is that phospholipid bound amounts of omega-3s vary between krill catch, and they are about 69% of its triglyceride anyway. So you're still paying for essentially just what a fish oil is. Very little is that phospholipid bound form. And on top of that, when you get a krill oil product, the EPA and DHA amounts are very, very low. And so that addition of that 30% of phospholipid bound with a higher bioavailability doesn't counterbalance the fact that the absolute amount of EPA and DHA is so much lower that it doesn't provide the benefits that we believe that it should from the research perspective. And so krill, what they do is they'll show you that research of, okay, in week 1, plasma saturation is slightly higher. When you extend that out past 2 weeks, fish oils catch up to the blood saturation and surpass krill oil on brain saturation because they have a tendency to cross the blood-brain barrier more effectively. And so all of the benefits that people talk about with krill seem to just kind of vanish when you actually look at it. They're not less contaminated. They're not necessarily more shelf stable. Astaxanthin content in it, you'd have to take a typical krill product, something between like 80 and 240 caps to make the astaxanthin amount actually matter.
Wow. What about for our vegan friends?
So the problem with vegan is that
besides everything, just be specific.
Well, so
just try to narrow it down if you can.
To save the vegans, I'm very anti restrictive diet in general. So I have the same feelings towards carnivore. I'm like, so you believe that fruits and veggies are somehow either poisonous or non-beneficial in some way, despite the mountains of evidence that fruits and vegetables probably have some benefits.
Listen, Dr. Big, with all due, there are defense chemicals in these vegetables.
Oh my God,
that are fighting.
But they will attack your spleen, kidney,
immune
livers,
system,
and probably your colon for that matter. So
most likely your colon.
And everybody points and to make people really like scared of this, they always point to the one situation where it could be problematic, which is raw kidney beans. And it's like, who out here is eating raw kidney beans?
I do, for my health.
Just pop them in.
What's his name? Creed Bratton from fucking Dunder Mifflin was eating mung beans at his desk. So they smell horrible, but they taste amazing.
But that's a perfect example too of like how, like, even in these documentaries that push veganism, I forget the last one. I remember What the Health from like 15 years ago, but whatever the most recent one.
Game Changers was the biggest.
Game Changers. Yeah, that was the recent one. And I loved how they had they profiled McGregor and Diaz fight. And how Diaz, the vegetarian or vegan or whatever he is, wins the fight, but don't talk at all about how this is the first time McGregor had to fight somebody that big. It's the first time McGregor had to put all this weight on. He was never used to fighting somebody this size. And that when they fought the second time, he completely mangled Diaz's face.
Well,
and how didn't bring that up?
How long had he been vegan too? And that's one of the things that they don't really like. I remember the strongman on that had just been vegan for like a year.
Yeah. It's like some people entering female sports.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes complicated.
How long have you been eligible to be in female sports?
No, but don't let's not digress too far.
Yeah, for the
vegan of everybody.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for the people that are vegan that aren't going to take a fish oil or krill oil, whatever, can they take something like
ALA?
Yeah.
The problem with ALA is, particularly in men, its conversion to EPA and DHA is absolute dog shit.
Got it.
And so it tends to work okay in women.
Why specifically in men? Is it obviously hormonal for some reason?
I honestly don't know. I haven't looked into it enough to tell you that. This is one of those I'll look into it and I'll get back to you.
So estrogen helps with conversion. It's like
why?
Maybe.
I can tell you that it does work significantly better in women than men. But I mean, veganism, one of the issues with veganism is that you have some very real nutrient deficiencies from veganism, and omega-3s is one of those big ones. And they're always like, well, we'll just eat like seeds. And I'm like, so you're going to rely on the ALA? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, but to get the amount of ALA to raise the EPA and DHA amount up to what you need, you're essentially just overloading yourself with fat.
Yeah, I was like,
and
it's only
so
1,000. It's only 1,000 calories of flaxseed.
There's 6,000 calories. The 6,000 calories of flaxseed are probably counterproductive, and they're like, no. And so, even when I work,
stuff was supposed to help with inflammation, I really seem to be getting more inflamed. Yeah, with all this flaxseed.
It's amazing in how that type of thing happens. And I always talk with my clients that are vegans, and I'm like, can you be a vegetarian? Because we can make vegetarian work really well, or especially pescatarians. Yeah. We can make pescatarians and vegetarians for an athletic build. You can make that work. Vegans are very, very difficult to make that work, because what do you have that can give you protein without overloading you on carbs and fat? You basically have seitan, like what are the other ones?
Tofu, seitan.
No, even tofu typically has large amounts of fat. Now you can get ultra processed ones, but you're living off of supplements. You're living off of seitan. You're living off of some vegetable protein, and I'm trying to remember. It's a processed vegetable protein. That's what I was blanking on. But regardless, I've looked into this significantly for some of my vegan clients, and I'm like, we've got like 3 choices to really fill this out.
I've spent 3 weeks trying to help you, and the best answer I can is become vegetarian.
Yeah, how about we switch to some dairy?
Yeah,
or an egg.
I had a coworker whose niece was sent to CHOP, Children's Hospital Philadelphia, for an eating disorder, and she was vegan, and they refused to feed her a vegan diet. She had to at least eat eggs.
It's problematic, and I get why people do it for like an ethical or moral reason. I'm not going to fault people for doing it for a moral reason. Let me put it that way. If you're doing it for a health reason, you just don't understand the human body.
Yeah, I am very interested in that argument of how many animals are killed to grow your vegetables.
So this is, again, kind of outside my full realm of knowledge, but
it's the methane gas emitted from the cow's butthole that we're worried about.
Well, you also have to understand that there is a certain amount of arable land that you can use for crops, right? However, you can have cattle and sheep grazing on land that you could not plant crops. There's semi-rocky land that can't be used. There's other land that maybe doesn't have the right drainage systems, everything like that. So saying let's get rid of all meat entirely is also ignorant of the environmental situations.
Well, the natural balance of the ecosystem.
Yeah, and if you were talking about biodiversity, technically switching everybody to vegetarian diets would destroy biodiversity more than anything else, because you get rid of a ton of land.
It's like we picked the wrong fight. I mean, we need to get more regenerative farming and all those practices back in order. All this monocrop and just destroying the soil is a bigger problem than everything else.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is actual farming practices are the big issue.
Yep.
It's if you want sustainability, it's not. It has nothing to do with all of these other ancillary things that people are making the biggest issues. It's crop rotation. It's it's using the right things in the right seasons. It's making sure that you're doing things that aren't depleting the soil constantly, which is your monocrop comment.
Yep.
How
do you feel about Bill Gates owning more farmland than anybody else in America? Tell us.
Constantly baiting this guy.
I live on an island where Oprah owns 26% of the entire island. I'm used to mega owners. Much? She owns 26%. Yeah,
I knew the acreage. I didn't know it was 26%. That's crazy.
It's massive. You can walk. We actually walk our dog right in front of our house, and every time we walk by, she has a camera on her front door. I'm like, that bitch will not come out to say hi to my dog.
That's crazy.
Every time.
He probably hates animals.
Did you join the Oprah book club just to burn the books that she recommends?
I honestly don't know a whole lot about her.
I just know she has a book club. That's about it.
Does she still run that stuff?
I have no idea. I'm digging.
I think that's all. I think that's all. I was going to say, I think that's all gone. And so I'm going to switch directions on you. Let's not give away too much of your spiel in March, because we want people to actually come, so I don't lose money and have to start an OnlyFans page. But
again.
There we go.
That's going to be how I supplement the rest of the event, Alan. Don't
Al,
worry.
this has been brought up for about 6 episodes straight. He just
Remember when I
drops it.
said
It's coming.
remember when I said earlier that we need to run 2 jobs sometimes?
Yes. Well, this is going to be one from the comfort of my own bedroom.
Yeah, he'll be doing a couple jobs on that second job.
Yes, I will. The higher the tip, the better the tip, the better the grip. So insulin has been kind of a hot topic lately, and I know that you like to be outspoken about all the hot topics, and you do a really great job in your stories. By the way, folks, if you're not following this guy, immediately start. I mean, I've posted his stuff before, we all have, but let's debunk and let's get people more comfortable with the idea of what the hell insulin is and why we shouldn't be afraid of it.
Well, insulin is a storage hormone, and so that's where people tend to. This is where the confusion builds, right?
Yep.
And I don't think that anybody would argue that. I think that's just a basic fact.
But let me ask you this, devil's advocate: is it actually a storage hormone, or is it really more of a transport hormone?
Delivery, I was gonna say.
It's a transport hormone and it's a storage hormone. It depends on which tissue that it's working in.
Right.
But the reason that you're bringing it up is I'm assuming we're hinting at the carbohydrate insulin.
It's constantly being the Gary Breccas,
okay. If you listen to Brecca or Taubes or Fung, you have been misled. And unfortunately, Ludwig, yeah. And then what's really funny is Ludwig has a lot of support because he was one of the big runners of Harvard Health.
Okay.
And so I don't think that people realize that he has tenure, which means they can't get rid of him. And so when he goes off on these absolute batshit crazy comments, they're just like, well, we can't do anything. He's got tenure. So there's this theory that all of these aforementioned guys push, including D'Agostino and some of the other guys. Ferris too. But the theory is that there's 2 prevailing theories for how weight changes. It's the main model is that energy balance is determined by thermodynamics. If you have calories in a system, if you have more calories than you burn, you gain weight. If you burn more calories than you take in, you lose fat. And that one seems to be the one that is valid. The other
sounds like pseudoscience.
Yeah, it sounds crazy.
It doesn't sound real.
The other one that's out there is the carbohydrate insulin model, and that's the one that these guys all follow probably because it's monetarily expedient for them. So their idea is that that insulin has an integral role on energy balance or on weight change in a person. And so they are concerned with essentially removing a lot of the carbs that people eat in their daily lives, because if you can lower overall insulin, then that will cause you to lose body fat. And what they do is they tend to be very polar about it, and they go extreme and they remove a ton of carbs from somebody, and then that person loses weight, and they're like, look, we just proved that what we do works, without regard for the fact that by removing all of those carbs, you've just removed about 2,000 calories from that person's diet, and then you've just essentially proven the other theory. And so the issue with
they have to do those studies with calorie control. We're on a 2,000 calorie, 3,500 calorie diet, no carbs, 3,500 calorie diet with carbs. What's the result?
If you, and this has been repeated ad nauseum in the research, if you equate daily protein and daily calories, it doesn't matter what you do with the fats and the carbs. Weight will change the same. Doesn't matter. Any study that says differently has not equated protein and total calories. Now, what they do is they will tend to point to a lot of diabetic research, or research, and that's obviously something where you have issues handling glucose.
Correct.
Or they'll point to research in a calorie surplus, which is not the condition that we're interested in anyways, if the goal is losing body fat. Now, if you have massively elevated insulin levels in the presence of a calorie surplus, you have the bricks to build a house, and you have a bunch of guys that are ready and willing to build that house. So they stack it up. If you have massively elevated insulin, but your calories are below the amount that would be necessary to maintain weight, you have a ton of guys that want to build this house with bricks, but they have no bricks. So they can't build those bricks, which would be body fat, onto a person. If you don't have the energy to store, a storage hormone there's nothing for it to tell to store.
Yep.
And so that's why the carbohydrate insulin model doesn't make any sense, because they're essentially saying that you're storing body fat, which is a storage of energy, from nothing. You can't create something from nothing. And so if you're in a negative energy balance, that's why this theory doesn't really make any sense. But they're consistently using situations where a person either has impaired glucose control, and so the insulin tends to be all over the place. But that still doesn't matter if there's no excess energy to store.
Correct.
And so if their theory was true, all of these things like semaglutide, these GLP-1 mimetics, these weight loss drugs that everybody is, Ozempic, that everybody is like clamoring to get right now, none of them would work if the carbohydrate insulin theory worked, because they raise insulin. Yet people that go on this massively lose weight, or at least have their appetites blunted to the effect that they take in less food and then they lose weight. Yeah. So if insulin was really that much of an issue, none of these drugs like Ozempic would even work.
Yeah, I'm a high school teacher as well as coaching, and I show the documentary Fed Up, which is, I really like the documentary, but then Ludwig comes on, and I always have to pause it at these spots where I'm like, what he's saying is not true. But he literally in this documentary says, when you eat that sugar and insulin is released, it literally converts that sugar to fat. And I have to, every time I got to pause, and I'm like, this is 100% not true. It's very interesting overall about the food industry and about the government's involvement in lobbying and extorting the WHO to change studies from recommending 10% of your caloric intake being from added sugar. And then America rolls in and we're like, yeah, that's not good for our sugar and lobbyists.
This hurts Halloween.
Yeah, we're not going to give our whatever $1 billion donation to the WHO this year unless you change the study. And they literally changed it to 25% of your intake. No more than 25% of your intake should be added sugar. A quarter of your daily intake should be added sugar. So like all those things were interesting. The way food lunch and all those offerings, it's very good. But then fucking Ludwig.
Well, it's also funny to see. It's also funny to see these carbohydrate insulin theory guys. You don't see this necessarily from the researchers as much as you do the fit pros that follow this model. They'll come in and then you'll be like, okay, well, what do we do with protein? And they're like, what do you mean? And you're like, well, exactly. Protein can spike insulin as much as carbs.
Yeah. So they've shown it with protein powder.
That's why you shouldn't have protein powder. That's why you need to eat only pasture-raised red meat.
A steak will do that.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's really funny to these guys when you have looked into this stuff and you know what's going around in the background. And you're like, okay, well, what do you think about steak? And they're like, steak's great. You get the carnivore guys will do the same thing. A lot of carnivore is based around the carbohydrate insulin model, because they think, okay, well, if we just eat red meat or meat, if we just eat meat and we cut out these carbs, well, then we're getting rid of that insulin response. But you're not getting rid of that insulin response because you're eating massive amounts of meat. And so you're getting probably a very similar insulin response.
Well, how about the fact that any competitive athlete, any bodybuilder, anybody who has any significant amount of muscle mass whatsoever is probably eating a diet that's 50% carbohydrates.
Yeah, I'm eating more carbs. Cases, yeah. I'm eating more carbs now purposefully.
Right.
With tracking, purposefully eating more carbs now than I ever have.
Right.
And
you're probably
drastic,
leaner,
the difference in my performance and like the pump that you feel and all that kind of stuff. So explain to people, I feel like a lot of people who have been maybe at least following me and Aram and listening long enough, I would hope have a little bit of an idea of this. What's insulin doing? Why should some people, based on their training protocol, maybe require more carbohydrates than somebody else less? It's not fair that Aram can have 450 grams of carbs. Why can't I have 450 grams of carbs?
So
you fat, bitch, because you fat.
People that have more lean muscle, people that have more lean muscle essentially have more metabolic flexibility. You have, if we're talking about this as a storage or a transport hormone,
explain the storage part.
You've got more places to store it than just your liver, which is nice. You've got a lot of lean muscle mass to store this. Your body controls glucose spikes better. And I'm not fear-mongering glucose spikes in people that have normal blood glucose response. If you're not diabetic, don't worry about your glucose. Your body's going to control it just fine. If you're consistently gaining weight and moving into obesity, that's where the mechanisms start to cause problems. Blood glucose spikes typically in healthy weight ranges, and particularly for people with lean muscle, is not a problem.
Yeah. And all the people now that want to get their continuous blood glucose monitors, or they want to start testing their blood sugar, and they're panicking because I had a spike after I ate. Because I don't think we've really gotten into depth at all. Not that it has to go crazy into depth. If somebody's doing that, what kind of a spike should they expect at what time periods after they eat? Because I know we could say all day, don't worry about it, that's normal. They're still going to want to do it, and they're still going to panic. I know it's broad because everybody's a little bit different, but what can they expect?
You can expect a rather large increase. Now, the reason that I'm not going to give specific numbers is because it's going to be dependent on what you eat, not only the individual foods, but the combination of foods. Because if you add in fats or you add in fiber, you're going to slow absorption, which is going to blunt the spike a bit, which is why when you're diabetic, we start recommending, okay, we'll have some more high fiber foods because your blood glucose will be more steady.
But the defense chemicals.
The catechol.
Now for folks who, I mean, I have a very easy guideline for me, like the way that I judge
how
it.
long should it be back at baseline? So no matter how high it got, okay, it's back to baseline at this time period, so therefore I shouldn't be panicking or whatever.
Back to baseline could be as long as like 8 hours,
right? And that's hence why we have HbA1c.
You've already had another meal.
We have 3-hour blood glucose testing. We have postprandial. We have wake up fasting blood glucose.
Yeah, typically 8 to 9 hours is considered fasting blood glucose, and that's because that's depending on what you've eaten. It could take that long for stuff to really kind of normalize.
Yeah, that's why you don't get blood scheduled at noon. You get that shit at 8 a.m.
Yeah,
okay,
6:30 in the morning. But it doesn't matter. And like these people that are using these continuous glucose monitors, first off, that's disordered eating. If you are using a blood glucose monitor to figure out what you're eating and you're not diabetic, then you've got some form of disordered eating here. If you're trying to follow things like the GI scales.
Oh God, Jimmy's favorite subject is the glycemic index. I think.
If you're
That's
following
why I don't eat carrots. That's why I don't eat carrots.
Watermelon is higher on the glycemic index than a Kit Kat bar.
Yeah,
Like why
I don't eat watermelon? I mean, you're proving my point here, doctor.
Probably why you're
stop eating fruit.
Allan is super fat because all he does is eat and drink watermelon.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. I've been catfishing you for years. When you see me at the event, you're going to be like, "What the hell is this? This guy is like 43% body fat."
He's going to be sucking down Kit Kats. Everybody's going to be like, "What's up with that?" It'll be like, "Have you seen the glycemic index on watermelon?"
I'm avoiding watermelon.
So. Yeah.
Well, what about for people that might suspect, because we have the functional medicine space, which I think could be helpful to some extent, but I think it also could be very fear mongering. So we have this idea of like inflammation is killing you, your gut health is bad, and it's destroying everything in your body. Your hormones are degraded. You're going to die in 2 weeks. And if you're insulin resistant, you'll never be able to lose fat. So if somebody's suspecting that they're insulin resistant, what are some telltale signs that they can actually look at to determine whether that is the case?
I mean, that's where I would recommend that people go in and get blood tests.
Yeah.
There's no use in guessing whether or not this is an issue. Actually go to a doctor and get this tested. But I do want to point out something about inflammation, because we've mentioned it multiple times, and I really want to be explicit on this. There is no single food, and if anybody wants this, message one of us and I can get you studies. There is no single food in typical diets that is inflammatory. In the absence of
seed
weight
oils,
gain.
Man, seed oils, man. Stop! You are
not even
turn this off now. Do not listen to the pseudoscience bullcrap.
Yeah,
this guy
first
is
off
a rogue nutrition coach.
First off, I've got glasses which suggest that I'm smart. Secondly, even if we look at straight sugar is not inflammatory in a diet in the absence of weight gain. And so, when we talk as coaches and we say you can have a cookie if it's going to make you feel better from time to time, if it's going to increase adherence, have a donut from time to time if it's going to make you feel better and increase adherence. And there are so many people that will come out and they will fearmonger, oh, well, you can't have sugar. I can't believe as a coach that you're recommending people have that.
So
I'm not telling people to go out and crush donuts constantly. I'm telling people that you're human, and the reality is that you're going to need some control over your dietary situation. And part of that is making your own choices. And sometimes that choice is, I'm going to have that donut. Does that mean that that's going to be a weekly thing? Not necessarily, no. And for some people, that's not the right choice. But having the ability to choose will typically keep people more adherent and successful long-term than vilifying any specific food stuff. And so I wanted to bring up that inflammatory comment because we made it multiple times. And that's a wonderful thing to bring up. Even pointing out that sugar itself is not inflammatory in the absence of weight gain. Yeah. What is inflammatory? Getting really obese.
Yeah.
That is extremely inflammatory.
I think it's such a great like debunking, not necessarily debunking, but just a statement for a lot of people who hear all these things. Yeah. And they're afraid of the seed oils. They're afraid of the phytochemicals. They're afraid of the sugar. They're afraid of everything. And to just understand that simple point right there.
Yeah. And again, I understand that this is a contentious topic. Reach out. I've got studies. Yeah. I'm more than happy to share these with you if this can mean that you're not going to have disordered eating from now on.
Well, I think it's just we live in this world now where like we have to we only train if our Oura ring tells us that we're ready or our Whoop tells us that we're ready.
So now you're getting into
I'm not going to eat unless my CGM says that my blood sugar is fucking balanced. It's going to get to a point now where a human being can't trust human being instincts anymore, and we have no connection to our own feelings in our own body because we have to have some study or some fucking thing tell us how to live, and it's getting ridiculous.
Well, you're actually getting into the weeds here because this is where I become unreasonable.
Yes, he said Oura ring, and
I absolutely hate
cringing.
The Oura ring, and I hate Whoop. I absolutely hate them, and I hate them so much because.
God, show us your Oura ring.
You can't.
Aram, show us.
Does he have one on?
I don't have one.
Oh, you stopped wearing it?
I haven't worn one in 3 years. It stopped charging. And
he's like, don't throw me under the bus on this one.
I picked up this thing.
I had it, and then I stopped. I'm like, I'm not using this data for anything, so I just gave a shit. I'm like, I don't care what it says. Whatever. Anyway, go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
The funny thing about these, if you look at them, I mean, what information is this actually giving us that's helpful? They can't tell. They can't tell sleep stages. You can't tell, particularly, you can't tell REM sleep. And the darker the skin that you have, the worse that it is. So this doesn't really work at all for
really
African Americans. Yeah, the darker your skin you have, it doesn't work.
That's why it worked so well with Aram, actually.
Yeah, because I'm translucent.
Yeah.
So yeah, it has real issues with that. But the sleep stages they're not accurate, particularly REM. But even if they were, my question to people are, do you feel recovered?
Yeah.
We don't need a self-fulfilling prophecy, a potential nocebo, in effect. We don't need a ring to tell us you're not recovered.
Yeah, it's like you feel like shit, but it says you're 97% recovered.
Okay, so now do I feel better? So it never works. It never seems to work in that range. Yeah, but it always seems to work in the it always seems to work in the opposite. Even if you're feeling good, if it tells you that you're not recovered, then you're like, oh, maybe I should skip the gym today.
Absolutely.
And so I see this happening in a nocebo effect all the time, but I never see it work in the beneficial effect. And people are like, well, I just like more information. And I'm like, you have enough information. The information is, what time did you go to bed? What time did you wake up? There's the information that you need.
How do you feel?
How do you feel? Yeah. And monitor that. Those things are really important to monitor. They can be very helpful.
Yeah, real quick, explain like the nocebo, because I understand the placebo and the nocebo thing, but for somebody who's like, they've never heard that word before.
Sure. It's essentially the opposite of a nocebo. It's an expectation effect in the negative, whereas the placebo is an expectation effect in the positive.
Yes.
So you take a sugar pill and then it greatly increases your performance. An example, there was actually a study where they used competitive powerlifters, and they told them that they were giving them a fast-acting steroid in pill form. And it was either saccharin or some kind of controlled rice sugar. I don't remember which. It doesn't really matter. But they told them that I think it was saccharin, but they told them that this pill is a new fast-acting steroid. They tested 1 rep maxes for squat, bench, dead. They gave them the pill the next week. The next week, every major lift went up on average 11 kilograms.
Wow.
For competitive power lifters, guys that probably know what it's like to take steroids. And so they were given this thing that they were told is a steroid. Now they made sure that they got a baseline 1 rep max. They made sure that through blood tests, they made sure that these guys weren't running steroids. Okay. And so then they gave them this. It went up 11 kilograms on average for each lift. Then the next week, they told half of that population that it was saccharin. Every one of those guys dropped back down to baseline. The guys that they didn't tell stayed 11 kilograms higher. So there's placebo. Nocebo works in the opposite direction. If I give you a pill, this is just a bad example, but if I give you a pill and I tell you that it's going to impair your performance, you could essentially see the opposite. So if we have a ring that tells us that we're not recovered, regardless of whether we're recovered or not, and remember that this is not something that has an electrode on your brain. The way that they do sleep studies is with electrodes that measure brain impulses. This is a ring that is using heart rate variability to make a guesstimate off of information that doesn't tell you what your brain's doing. And so it's kind of a guesstimate of a guesstimate. And so you get this guesstimate of a guesstimate. It tells you you're not recovered. And you're like, oh, I guess I'm not recovered. Whereas if you, whereas if you hadn't gotten that information before, maybe you would have said, I feel a little bit down, but I'm just going to get in.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I guess I am. You start to notice those things, like the same people who they start to feel little sniffles, and then you start thinking like, I'm getting sick, and then they end up getting sick. I read this story about like a nocebo effect, where the guy was told, and this is apparently a true story. The guy was told they found a cancerous tumor somewhere in him. He has 3 to 4 months to live. Dies 3 months later, and then in the autopsy, they dive in and see that they misdiagnosed him, and it was a benign tumor. Kind of a thing, whatever, that it wasn't actually cancer, but this guy, I guess, downward spiraled. Again, apparently a true story, apparently all that stuff, but absolutely. No, I think that's a great point. Nocebo when it comes to the ring.
I mean, we see that with these things that that monitor recovery. We see that with these things that monitor calorie burn. I mean, those watches, and I don't know if the Oura Ring covers calorie burn, but
it gives you TDE, which I will say, that was the steps, which I thought were overinflated, because I mean, I used to have to take the ring off when I jerked off because it would count steps while I was doing
1,000 steps.
Way.
He was 85,000 steps a day. He was
so this is like
everybody else actually puts it on that hand when they jerk off, just so that they could tell their coach they had 10,000 steps.
I was taking my ring off because I didn't want to be dishonest.
This is ultra endurance cardio.
That and then I was, but
you are an athlete.
What I did see was I thought that the TDE information was actually interesting, because when I matched up my weight data to my daily intake data with chronometer, and then I correlated it to what my TDE was through the ring, there was definitely some times where if I was overeating to my TDE, I was putting on a little bit of weight. And so I thought it was actually relatively accurate.
Well, it's funny when you look at the calorie count studies, they typically are off by about 20%, but that's the problem with that is that gets compounded by the fact that nutritional information is allowed to be off by 20% too. So you can essentially have a 40% error. Yeah. But they've actually been shown to be off. These wrist mounted and handheld devices have been shown to be off by upwards of 93%.
That's insane.
And I've seen this with clients that will wear their ring or their watch, and they'll go for like a weight training session for like 45 minutes, and they're like, I burned 1,000 calories. I'm like, there's no way. There's no way in the world that you burned 1,000 calories lifting weights.
Do we have any estimations as far as like what can people expect? Like in an hour of weightlifting, what is the estimate for calories burned?
The intensity variation is
and I know that, but if we were just ballparking, just so somebody can finally conceptualize that there's no fucking chance in hell you're burning over 500 calories working out
for a typical bodybuilding type session.
Yeah.
You're going to burn between about 300 and maybe 450.
Yeah.
250 to 450.
And that's somebody who's probably working towards relatively high intensity, close to failure.
You know what's funny is that intensity doesn't really raise calorie burn very much. It's volume.
Oh, okay.
And so you can be intense as hell with your 5 rep sets. It doesn't matter. You're going to burn like 20 extra calories.
Okay. So it's just the amount of work you're doing.
Well, it's the reason. Well, think about it this way. You probably understand it if I give you an analogy. I'm sure you understand it now, but you probably knew it already if you think about this. When we talk about overall calorie burn, one of the big things that we say for our clients is get your step count up.
Right.
You're not working very intensely, but you can do it for an extremely long period of time, which is why NEAT tends to be much more significant than active exercise. It's because the volume is what really matters for calorie burn, simply because more intense, yes, you can burn some more calories if it's continuous in shorter periods of time. but recovery becomes a real issue. So you tend to burn out way before you would actually hit an absolute calorie content that would be higher than if you just walked.
Well, that's why I like the whole Mike Israetel stimulus to fatigue ratio thing that he talks about, where the amount of work, let's use a minimal effective dose approach to training as opposed to how much can I spend my time in the gym. I don't think anybody in their right mind is asking for what is the most amount of time I can spend in the gym and get the best possible outcome.
Yeah. I mean, so whether it's minimal, I would not try minimal if that's possible. I would do minimal if that's all we can do. I would essentially try to get to a point where diminishing returns kick in rather than minimal.
Yeah, and I think it's like that minimum effective dose where it's enough to create a response versus just the minimum amount of work that you can do.
Well, so there's a difference between minimum effective response and getting to a point that has the diminishing returns. So for instance, when we talk about the research out there that shows, okay, well, where do we really start to see great results from a hypertrophy program? And it's between something like 10 and 20 working sets per muscle group per week.
Yeah.
And if you continue looking at the research, so the more volume that you have, even up to like 44 sets, technically returns more lean muscle than the 10 to 20. Sure. But once you hit 20, 22, 24 or so, depending on the muscle, you start to have diminishing returns. Then the amount of time that you're putting in for that return becomes very, very small. Yeah. So if 10 is our minimum, that could be our minimum effective dose, but you may gain significantly more lean muscle if you're up at 20. I would essentially try to push myself to that point that we hit that best bang for our buck rather than minimal effective dose. So now, minimal effective dose is a good thing.
Time spent in the gym getting the work done versus I'm now having to sacrifice my life to be in the gym to get this work done.
Right. And yeah, I mean, you can look at studies and people like Milo Wolf and Pack. I don't know if you know those two guys. They're great guys. And you know, I've talked to them a bunch. I've actually reviewed a bunch of their studies. But even when they just came out with a hypertrophy thing. And
I saw that Pack did that. Yeah.
Yeah. And even in their research, they say like you can keep going up in volume. You're going to keep like there's essentially you're going to run out of steam before you hit that volume that stops returning benefits. But the percentages that you're eking out on those very, very high volume training scenarios, it's just not worth that time or the potential for, injuring yourself as you get more and more fatigued.
Or the fact that, let's be honest, for most novice to intermediate lifters,
they're not going to spend that time.
That and then the per rep intensity and focus is just going to get lost. And then the weight becomes submaximal. That becomes less advantageous. So we have to make all those considerations as well. That's why I'm kind of happy that we're leaning into this idea of lower volume, higher intensity, lower.
No, I agree. Yeah.
It seems to make sense now for guys like us who already have a pretty significant amount of muscle. Like it's not going to take a lot of work for us to keep it on. But let's be honest, for any one of us three to really significantly get to that next proverbial level, whatever that must be, it's going to take a fuck ton of work and probably some drugs.
I was just going to say steroids.
Probably.
Take some supplements.
But yeah, I mean, I think that the idea of minimal effect, fish oil will help. I think the idea of minimal effective dose is it's beneficial to know, because then you can look at that and you can look at, okay, well, if this is the minimal effective dose, can I at least get that in?
Yeah.
And then after that, well, what can I do beyond that that's both comfortable and preferable for me to help get the goals that I want to achieve? And if you've got the right expectations, if you've got, the right time that you're spending in, then you can get the most out of your training program.
Yep. Jimmy, anything else?
No, it'd be like a total topic change. But no, I feel like it was like there was solid stuff that debunking things and then clear cut when it came to the supplements, things that people could specifically be looking for. I feel like a lot of times people just have these vague things that they want to say. And it's like, yeah, well, nah. It was just very specific with the stuff he answered. It was awesome.
I also want to do a character review of Dr. Allan Bacon, because the other day I offered to give a referral bonus for tickets sold to all the presenters of the event. And so far, Dr. Allan Bacon was the only person to refuse his referral bonus, even though he's on an island that's still burning actively down. and he's going through financial hardship, he refused his referral bonus and said that I should keep all of it to fund the event. So this is the type of individual you guys are dealing with here, folks.
And surprise, all the referral bonuses that other people would be getting are being sent to Maui Athletics, Dr. Allan Bacon.
I'm playing the long game here.
Yeah. Genius. We know you. You're a jerk. We know your games.
This is one of those
That's
things
awesome,
where
man.
like we're all business owners, right? And so I understand what this takes from you. It takes emotion, it takes your resources, and you're putting out a essentially a product. This conference is essentially a product that is leagues above many of the other ones out there in what they give you. I mean, all the food that you're giving out, the open bars, the quality of the people that are being presented. I mean, you comb through people to really make sure that the guys that are there, the guys and girls that are there, are really getting some good information. And I know what it feels like to put that much effort into something and just say, hey, this is an example of me. I want it to succeed really well. And at the same time, when you do that, you deserve the returns on that. And so, I think that getting a commission to do something that as a presenter, I probably should be doing just to help out anyways. It's
novel concept.
It helps.
Yeah.
Helps the industry. The one, like I'll say with you are probably better than most, and I don't follow and scroll too much. You're better than most. You answer questions because you put those question boxes up.
Yeah.
So like Aram said at the beginning, follow him. People ask a question and you don't just give this quick yes or no answer. Like you explain it. And if it takes you 2 or 3 stories to explain it, like you want to make sure that people are getting good, thorough answers to their questions. And that's what I admire about you more than what most people are doing. It's just you genuinely care. The way that you interact with other people's pages, it's just very clear you're a genuine person, transparent, care. So I appreciate that about you. And you showed us that today with the way you answered questions.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, guys. I mean, I think that this is one of those things where when you get into these businesses, because it's a passion more than anything else, I think that really shows for a lot of people.
Yeah, it should. It should. But this business is also very good at taking people that were nobody and turn them into somebody, and then creating a complete monster.
Well, I mean, we're fighting. We're in this together because we're fighting against those types of people that I push videos up about, and I have to debunk. I can't believe I had to do one today about someone telling people that knee sleeves were going to.
Oh, I saw that.
Was awesome.
I was like, no, this is the worst.
Well, and that kid that did that video was such a dick too. He was like, look at these losers putting on their knee sleeves.
They're like wearing gloves.
What?
Yeah, I was like, this kid is awesome. I love this kid, and I need to put him up in a video.
Yeah, just because you're 25 and have 0 knee issues whatsoever and can't squat more than 250 doesn't mean.
Well, it's funny because I think that putting out good information makes it a little bit more difficult to get your name out there, and it shouldn't be that way. I think that social media essentially rewards bad or inflammatory information. It rewards it not necessarily intentionally, but it does. And this is my theory on that. If you put out, say that you're a fitness person and you tell everybody that you need to stop squatting at 90 degrees. Because it's
that guy's
somehow
name.
That's not no.
His name
You're
just
a
came to the
random.
buddy
You're
of
a
mine
random
today.
fitness person.
I'm looking at my direct messages right now.
And you say that to somebody.
I won't say it. But
you run around making videos doing these absolutely like ridiculous movements. It doesn't matter that this is good information or not. The people that believe the information that you're putting out are going to hit like and share it. You're going to get double reach because the people that know that this is absolute bullshit will look at this and they'll say, this is ridiculous, and then share it and say, hey, everybody take a look. So if you're, look at how ridiculous this is. So if you're coming from a position of, I only want to put out good information, it makes it more difficult. And that's why you get people like Fung and Ludwig and some of these other guys, Ludwig, I don't know, which, and somebody else. And so you end up getting this bad information spreads much more easily. And even the people that know better, we're complicit in that. Yeah. Because we're the ones that are sharing this and saying, hey, look at how bad this is. and not necessarily educating people on why this is bad. And so we end up spreading this thing. And I'm not saying that the people that do this are necessarily wrong in what they do, but the reality is it's harder to spread good information because it just doesn't sail like
in a clickbait society.
Yeah.
But not, and that even the way that you handled that post was so good. You didn't just say, which would the common response is, this is BS. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, you explained why it might be good for some people, how the wraps are different than that, because people like conflate the two, think that the knee wraps are the same as the knee sleeves. And you just explained all the nuance of simply wearing sleeves and how for some people this and that, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, oh, so it doesn't allow the person to continue to wonder when they hear these things. They've heard the whole explanation, and now when it comes up again, they understand it instead of like trying to figure out which one's right or wrong, because it's not always one is right or wrong. It's a combination of information.
Yeah, and I think that when we're explaining these things, I think that that's the right way to go about things. Usually what I'll do is, and I don't always get it right, but what I attempt to do is I'll look at it and I'll say, okay, well, if I was this guy that believes this inflammatory statement, how would I argue my stance? And so then you have to address any type of argument that he would shift to.
Yeah.
Once you put out a stance showing like why it's wrong, because it's you tend to get used to this the more that you talk to people online, because you start to see how people will shift that goalpost.
Yeah.
And
it's so, like you responded as if you were having a conversation with him and he said it and you said, hey, here's just another perspective on that. And how blah, 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 blah. Like just a nice normal conversation, the way things should be.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it should. And so, you know, I this is again goes back to one of the reasons that I like connecting with guys like you, because I think that both of you put out information with the right intent. You make sure that you are you know, backing some of the things that you say. You make sure that you're looking into some of the things that you say. And you guys don't put out content just to put out content to become famous. You put out content because you want to actually help people.
Novel concept. What do you mean?
It's very strange.
That's why I purposefully keep my following so small.
That's a good plan. I don't do that. My issue is that Instagram is like, this guy is way too boring to share.
Well, Allan, it's going to be fucking awesome finally meeting you in person in March. People will be able to find you after this. Not that you were hard to find anyway, but appreciate you sharing your, I guess, morning with us.
It was noon when we started. Yeah,
it was noon. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So afternoon with us, and we will see you very soon. And if anybody has any questions for Allan, he will answer every single one of them in his DM. Yeah. So please bother him as often as possible. He loves working for free.
Yeah, and you can comment because these are all going to be going up on YouTube now. You can comment there with any questions. Then maybe we're bringing Allan back for a part 2 so that we can get some of those questions answered. And Allan, if you want tonight, we're premiering episode 100 on YouTube. You can hop in and interact with the 6 people that show up.
That'll be awesome.
It'll be 3 people.
I'll be part of that whole massive influx.
Yeah.
It'll be both of our parents and
Allan. If you show up, we're gonna have a 33% increase in audience, and that's what we're looking for.
Hey man,
it's all about gains.
I'm here to support.
Absolutely. And then our last question is: show us your abs. We make every guest show us their abs. Okay.
It's not happening today.
We've never done that before, just so you know. We appreciate you respecting yourself and not showing us. But seriously, though, bye.